Welcome to Penn State Dickinson Law's Profiles in Leadership series. My name is Daryl Lim. I serve as the H. Leddy Montag Chair and Associate Dean for Research and Innovation at the Law School. This series offers an unparalleled opportunity to glean insights from top leaders who serve in government, education, the private sector, and civil society. In each episode, we invite these leaders to reflect on their journeys and share skills, core values, and the qualities that make them the leaders today. We are very pleased to have a special guest interviewer, that's Professor Catherine Pearson, who is Professor of Law and Arthur L. and Sandra S. Piccone Faculty Scholar at Penn State Dickinson Law. She will be the principal interviewer for Crystal West Edwards, one of our alums. Crystal is principal in the Wealth Preservation Group and has extensive experience in the areas of elder law, special needs, planning and advocacy, estate planning, and estate administration and counseling. She advises aging individuals and those with disabilities with issues pertaining to complex estate and tax planning, asset preservation, eligibility for means-tested government benefits, fiduciary appointments, and representation and advocacy. She's also a trusted advisor to financial institutions and corporate fiduciaries with judicial and administrative accounting and counseling regarding initial or continued means testing, government benefits eligibility for its trust beneficiaries. She's a sought-after speaker and has authored numerous publications on the topics of elder and disability law, estate planning, special needs trusts, and government agencies. She's also the co-chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys and a fellow to the American College of Trust and Estate Counsel. So over to you, Professor Pearson.
Thank you so much, Daryl. That was one of the most comprehensive introductions to a member of our esteemed alum group that I've ever heard. And rightly so, because the area of law that Crystal practices in is that broad, that diverse, and that important, particularly in the year 2024 and beyond. One of the things I just saw in one of the legal magazines recently was they were talking about the top two fields for growth in law. And elder law was the number one. And it's funny, they've been saying that for probably 2 decades, but I think it's finally hit as not just the baby boomers have become, quote, of age, but people who are, under that baby boomer generation are also approaching. So it hits families, it hits, governments, it hits social service agencies. It really has a lot of impact on a lot of people. So Crystal, please introduce us to where you are located and how you spend your day.
So I am talking to you from the great state of New Jersey. Now, that is by way of North Carolina, because I do bring my home state with me wherever I go. So North Carolina is in my heart, but New Jersey is where I'm physically present and where I practice. I'm a 2008 graduate of Penn State Dickinson. So that makes me just getting a driver's license. I'm 16, right? We think about it in like human years. I'm a teenager in the law. But I feel like 16 years, you end up being one of the OGs. You've been practicing forever, and there are lawyers that you're working with that don't write in cursive. It's a new world now. It certainly is a new world. But I spend my day talking to families, talking to advocates, to self-advocates, in how to provide care, how to pay for care, and how to make sure that what we have collected and earned during our lifetime passes to the people and places we want it to go at death.
Very good. I know that as a law professor, when somebody hears that I teach courses in either law and aging or elder law, they'll say, well, what is elder law? And I have a little canned speech that I give where I say, elder law, estate planning is about everything that happens to your money after you pass away. Elder law is about everything you want to have happen to your money before you pass away. But Crystal, how do you help people understand why they might come to see an attorney with your particular package of specializations?
So your summary is perfect. I say it slightly differently. First, I tell people what we are not. So
Mhm,
I'll say elder law is not estate planning for seniors. Like,
mhm.
it's not the same thing, and a lot of people will think about it that way. This practice area, the elder law practice area, is, in my humble opinion, the only area that every person living, breathing at some point, previously or now, needed us or our services, whether they knew it or not. So if you're someone who's interested in environmental law, you may meet a whole bunch of folks that never have dirty property and have no reason to engage unless all your friends are in the, own dry cleaners, for example, right? But the reality for us is that we are living, and one day we're going to die. And I tell families that your money is only as good, excuse me, that your wills, your estate plan is only as good as the money you have when you die. And so my role is to make sure that your care and your other expenses are covered during your lifetime, so that the things that you want to transition at your death go there and go there in a way that you want it to. The vast majority of what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis is family education of the things that you wouldn't necessarily think you have to talk to a lawyer for. So it's counterintuitive that if your loved one gets sick, that you need a lawyer, right? If my loved one gets sick, I need a doctor. I need a geriatric nurse. I want to make sure that, I am setting up a suite of healthcare professionals that are going to get us to our goal. What families don't think of is, if my loved one gets sick, I need a lawyer, because I need to make sure that if mom or dad can no longer make decisions for themselves, that someone else can make a decision for them, or that they have the legal authority necessary to access confidential medical information so that they can help their family member either guide them in making a decision or make it on their behalf. Um, Whether or not they have enough money to cover care, and what care really looks like, and how expensive is it really. So a lot of it is client education. For the people who have experienced the long-term care planning process during their lifetime, they come to me, they know the questions to ask. 80% of my clients call on the phone and they speak to my legal assistant, and they're like, my friend said that I needed to talk to her and I don't even know what's going on. And so we then say, okay, well, what happened? My dad had a stroke last week. Okay, we're going to schedule an appointment. We're going to walk you through the process of what it's going to look like. And it starts with the care tail. So I always tell families, we're not going to have the money tail wag the dog so much, right? We need to know what care someone needs. And so we sit down and we go through what the care needs are. I'm not a medical professional. I can't tell them whether or not one care plan is better than another. But to the extent that they have an idea of where they want their loved one to be, or what their circumstances are for caregiving needs, then I can create, a financial plan, basically our implementation, so to speak, of how we're going to get that care paid for through a combination of resources and government benefits.
I think that one of the ways that anybody who comes to law school decides on what to practice is episodic. It's because you stumble across a field that might just ring a bell with you. Or I always say tax people, they know from birth that they want to do taxes.
They
But
do.
other than tax lawyers, I think many of us kind of, work our way around to find something.
Yeah.
And certainly I've been practicing law for about 15 years before I even considered elder law. And really the reason I considered elder law was because I was teaching in the clinics at Dickinson law. And I realized that, we needed an additional clinic. And there were a lot of care facilities around us in Pennsylvania, which told me the population was aging. And so I began going to programs just to learn about it. And I always remember the first program that I actually hosted. I was pretty naive. Another person, I was standing at the window as we were watching people come in to the program. And we were all of a sudden we got very frightened because all the people who were coming in were very old attorneys. And we thought, oh no, they think that this is a program for elderly attorneys. But it turned out, no, that's not what it was at all. It was lawyers aging with their clients and knowing what their clients would need because they were also experiencing it in their family. But for a young person who finds elder law, tell us how you discovered elder law.
Truly by mistake, right? The best mistake of my life, but that I certainly did not get to Dickinson thinking that one day I would be an elder law attorney, because I didn't know that elder law was a thing. I didn't know that it existed. It was a whole new world to me. So when I got to the law school, I wanted to do health law. And contrary to what you see today when you walk through the halls of the old Trickett Hall, what do we call it? A Katz? When you walk through the Lewis Katz building?
Yes, yes.
So when you walk through the Lewis Katz building, they have a health law certification and a health law court. We had none of it. Right? And I wanted to do health law. And so I worked with another professor that was there at the time. I started a student health law organization, and I wanted to double down on that. And towards the last few weeks or so of my 1L year, Professor Pearson, I don't know if you've heard of her, this lady that was at the school back then, she published an article that talked about a case that one of the clinics was doing that was assisting a gentleman with an appeal for his Medicare benefits. And so I'm reading this article, and they're talking about, he had a service that was provided by a physician. The coverage was denied by Medicare, and the clinic was taking up this appeal on his behalf because it was medically necessary. And Medicare was saying that it wasn't a covered service. And so I'm reading this and I'm like, this is health insurance. I want to do health law. It's like, I can do health insurance. In my past life, when I was in college, I did medical claims billing. So I'm like,
Very good.
she's talking to me. This is health insurance. I have a medical claims billing background, and I want to do health law. This is it. And so I sent Professor Pearson an email, who I had never seen. I didn't know what she looked like. She did not teach 1L courses back then. And she's like, well, come by my office. So I came by the office to talk about, this article. And so she gave me a little bit more color to what the case was about and how they ended up getting to the resolution. And I felt like in that moment, I was being interviewed, but she'll probably deny it. But I did think that she was possibly interviewing me because the following year I was invited to join one of the clinics that the school had at the time. So that's how I ended up finding elder law, right? Was an article that Professor Pearson wrote that talked about a health insurance appeal. But from that, then I said, okay, health insurance. So there's this practice area that's not health law that deals with health insurance, but it only really deals with Medicaid. Well, Medicaid is health insurance. And so then from there, my 1L summer, I interned with Central Jersey Legal Services. And when I took the position, it was with the intention of working with their health law kind of project where they were going to be doing Medicaid eligibility for people. When I got there, the funding had actually been on pause for that. So I did other things that summer, but then I picked it back up my 2L year interning for the Office of Governor's Counsel in the department that represents the agency that administers the medical assistance program in Pennsylvania. And between that and the clinic, I was off and running.
That's great. I think that one of the strengths of our clinics is that we keep an eye on what is developing. And we have a community law clinic now. We have a medical legal partnership clinic. We have a children's advocacy clinic, but really all of them are trying to do what you just described of keep your eye on where things are developing. And we do have this ongoing continuing health law focus at the law school. And certainly part of that is Penn State, is a strong health university. But at the same time, we're always looking for places where people can work on the government side, they can work on the individual side, they can work on a provider side. So if somebody who is the provider of the care can be the person, be the organization that ends up hiring our students.
That's right.
And so one of the things I've been seeing really, we have a 2-day Elder Law Institute in Pennsylvania every year in July.
PBI.
And PBI and Elder Law Institute. And it's, it draws lawyers from New Jersey, Maryland, Virginia, and of course, Pennsylvania, and sometimes beyond. And that's because Pennsylvania is a center of healthcare concerns. Part of it's because we're an aging state, as well as the other states around us. But really what it's all about is this interconnection between health law, family law, and aging, so that we're trying to get the best outcomes for the individual and the family. One of the things I wrote an article about, and in fact, I'm actually giving a presentation on it for Oklahoma later in June, was the question about conflicts of interest for lawyers. Lawyers traditionally have thought of themselves as family law lawyers, rather than, representing juveniles or older members of the family. And one of the reasons why juvenile law and elder law exist, and juvenile advocacy and elder advocacy exist, is because sometimes the lawyers were taking their directions just from the younger family members. And not too surprisingly, the money was not going in the right direction, or at least it wasn't going in the best direction. And so I think that that's really become something that is an important part of practicing as a professional in either elder law or estate planning, is recognizing who your client is. And that's one of the things that all of our clinics are very good at. Now, one of the things you've done that I'm really impressed with is, we mentioned briefly the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, but it's kind of the premier organization on the elder law side of the practice in the country. And it kind of marks the beginning of elder law as a specialization. The National Academy of Elder Law was established in 1987. And then the Elder Law Foundation, National Elder Law Foundation, NELF, we call it, was founded in 1993. And one of the things that they did to support the growth and professionalism and the understanding of the ethical issues was create a certified elder law attorney status. You, Crystal, are one of the rather small group of individuals across the country that have the certified elder law attorney status, CELA, we call it. And I think you're the very first African-American attorney to gain that. So that's amazing and important. Can you talk a little bit about what went into getting that status?
Sure. So first thing I'll say is, because as a student, I could understand the importance of organizations. So there are people who are joiners, and that's great. But when it comes to credentialing, setting yourself apart from others, or if you're in a room with 10 lawyers who do the same thing that you do, presumably, why should someone hire you over someone else? Because there is a business aspect to the practice of law. The credential for most of us in the elder law space is going to be through NELF, through the National Elder Law Foundation's certified elder law attorney designation. There are some states that have their own designation, but I'm not in one. And so at graduation, when I did what career services told me not to do, which was to just cold send my resume to a whole bunch of people. Generally, that's not a successful tool for folks. But it worked out for me because I targeted CELAs. I targeted certified elder law attorneys. And I sent my resume to them and said, I'm a student that's interested in this area. What's up? Kind of thing. So because I targeted CELAs, I wanted to be one. And I said, from the moment that I started my practice as a baby lawyer with no experience, that the first day that I'm going to qualify for this exam is 5 years after I've been a practicing attorney. And so I knew that everything I was doing was building up to that certification so that I can show the world really that it's not just my practice area, but I am 10 toes deep into it. I'm not dabbling in it. This is my life. Come see me, and I am your subject matter expert. And I'm putting that in quotes because, you know, we don't use the term expert from a ethics perspective, but that's kind of how I wanted to be known. So the way I went about it, I ended up working for an elder law firm. And we had a pretty diverse sampling of the types of cases that elder law embodies. So elder law has aspects of estate planning. It has aspects of litigation. Side note, I told Professor Pearson when I was a student that I never wanted to litigate ever, 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 freaking ever. Kill me first. I don't want to do it. And of course,
I remember that.
The first case she gave me was a case that required me to what? Go to court. And I was like, oh. But then I realized it wasn't that bad, and now I'm in court all the time. But I don't consider myself a litigator, but there are aspects of litigation for this practice when it comes to having the court appoint someone to act on behalf of someone else through guardianship. Will contests can exist and things like that. We've got government benefits, Medicaid eligibility, VA benefits, housing issues that arise, care advocacy, which is really just making sure that places are listening to the needs of our clients, whether it's from our clients or elsewhere. So because the elder law practice is so diverse, the certification requires that you have experience in all of those different areas. Even though you may consider yourself 10 years from now, for the students that may be watching this, you may consider yourself a Medicaid nerd, which is me. You still have to know all of the other things beyond just Medicaid. So it was really making sure that when I started working with the firm that I was at, that I was able to say to my then bosses, but we don't really use that term anymore now, I guess in 2024, hey, I saw that you have the blah, blah, blah case. Do you need help on that? You know, being a little bit proactive in the types of cases and the diversity of cases that you see, so that I could qualify to sit the exam. But there is an exam component to it. There's also a peer review. So I couldn't just be a diligent lawyer in my law firm. I needed my other colleagues in New Jersey to know who I am, what I do, and for them to be my adversary in some cases, right? Or work together in other cases so that they could vouch that I kind of like know what I'm doing a little bit, right? And so that's how I prepped for it. Diversity of cases, getting to know my colleagues locally, and then studying like you won't believe at every step of the way for the exam that at the time had like a 47% pass rate.
Right. Yeah, and that's always the thing that I think our students least like to hear is that you have to keep learning. But that's, of course, also part of why law is a great career, because you aren't making widgets that stay the same forever. The law is always changing and adapting, and we have to adapt and change with it.
And your facts are going to change too, Professor. I just wanted to mention that, you know, you made the comment earlier about who's the client. There are certain things that I learned in law. So, you know, law school teaches us how to see things differently, how to think like a lawyer, right? How to be a zealous advocate and all that. Great, you graduate and you're like, I got all this knowledge and I don't know jack. And then you get to work and you know, you're meeting with a client and there are 3 generations of people in the room and they're all telling you things that you need to know and the what and the whom. And the who's the client is the question that we ask every single day. Whenever we're engaging a new client, who is the client? Am I representing the agent under the power of attorney, or am I representing mom or dad who still have capacity? If mom and dad don't have capacity, can they engage me? No, they cannot. So then now they're being engaged by the agent. I mean, it is so ingrained in what we do. And it is, I think, the biggest ethical rule that we see day to day in this practice.
Yeah, I often call it the $1,000,000 question, because if you do it wrong, that's what it might cost you and your malpractice carrier, I
That's
guess.
right. That's right.
Yeah, so no, it's a challenge. You've mentioned several times about the diversity of subjects that you look at. Let's look at diversity in a more traditional way too. What about client base? Is there a need for lawyers of color working in both elder law and estate planning, in your opinion?
Absolutely. We are not a diverse practice whatsoever so if we take the larger group, right? Because as an elder law attorney, I would say that estate planning is still at the core of what we do. Will preparation, powers of attorney, medical directives. I don't know an elder law attorney that does not do that aspect of estate planning, right? So if we think about the larger group of just estate planners, there are very few minorities. I'm in a college. It's the American College of Trust and Estates Council, ACTEC. It's 2,500 of us in the world, because it's not just in the US. We have international fellows. I'm the fourth African American. There are 7 of us today out of 2,500, right? And I was elected to the college in 2020. So it is not it's not an area where you see great diversity. Then if I peel out from the American college, right, and I just think about the CELAs, the certified elder law attorneys of the world, there are about 500 of us. There are 50 in New Jersey. So of the 50 ACTEC fellows in New Jersey, I'm the only African American. There's 1 South Asian male, and there's, as of 6 months ago, 1 South Asian female, right? So we now have 3 people of color out of 50 in the state of New Jersey that are certified. But why that's important is because there are cultural distinctions and differences as to how we approach the discussion of aging. There are some communities where the concept of our loved one leaving the home is a non-starter. And sitting and meeting with an attorney who says, let's plan for your worst case scenario, which is the day you have to be in a nursing home. They've shut down and stopped listening to you at your very first sentence because it's never going to be a thing. I think that for the vast majority of attorneys in this area that live in diverse areas, there are programs, there are, just local level discussions to ensure that all of us are aware of some of these distinctions. Sure, some will delve in more than others, but I do think that our practice area has a general desire to meet people where they are. But there's no comfort level like having someone who you connect with, on a much deeper level.
And I think for so many people, you were talking earlier about some people come to you and they know what question to ask, but many people don't know. And if you're afraid to go and talk to somebody because you don't want to look like you don't know something,
That's right.
that's the biggest thing I worry about. You're missing opportunities to help your older members of your family or your younger members of the family who need help. Talk a little bit about special needs planning and how that's become such a big part of the elder law practice, ironically.
Yeah, so I consider myself, if I was at, a cocktail party and someone said, "Oh, what do you do?" I will typically say, I'm an estate planner who specializes in elder and special needs planning. And they're like, "What?" Right? And so, from that, I will say the reason why someone is going to see me as opposed to seeing my friend down the street is that I'm not just going to prepare the documents, but I'm going to follow them through the life course. Most of my clients are either planning for long-term care or they are caring for a loved one with an intellectual developmental disability. And so if I have someone who now, let's say I might be in generation 3, right, the grandchild, has an intellectual or developmental disability, in doing their planning, I'm doing the trust for them so that they maintain government benefits. But when they turn 18, we're filing for guardianship. When they turn 21, we're applying for state level disability benefits. And I'm going to make sure that the trust I prepared 15 years ago, right, is implemented and continues the goal of what grandma or mom and dad initially had. So special needs planning is a part of the elder law practice, in the sense that it's the same programs, it's the same trusts that are prepared, it's the same general type of planning. But I can tell you that from a family perspective, the worlds are wildly different, in the sense that a parent who is doing planning for their child with developmental disabilities does not want to hear or have their kid be grouped with the seniors, right? So even though it's the exact same thing, we just got to put a different name on it, you know? But special needs planning is about half of my practice. I mean, when I first started practicing, I would say elder law was 90%. Right now, elder law is about 50%, because there are so many families that have loved ones with autism or have loved ones with Down syndrome, other medical conditions that require that life continuum of care.
And sometimes too, what you're doing is when you're talking to somebody, about estate planning, they're doing estate planning, thinking of it as a traditional form of estate planning. And they may be the grandparent, but they may just think of gifting money, to the younger person,
Right.
which will not achieve the best outcome for the family.
Which is why we ask, right? So at the point immediately upon someone hiring me to do their estate plan, I send them a questionnaire that asks them a ton of questions. And I will tell them, my legal assistant typically will say, this information is really helpful so that we can tailor your discussion with Crystal consistent with what your needs are. And they're like, huh, okay, whatever. And then we get on the call and I say, oh, I see that you have a granddaughter with a disability. What disability is that? Right? And then they'll tell me, maybe, someone may have had a car accident, has a physical disability, whatever. But depending on what the circumstance is, I can then say, okay, well, you know what? We really, in your documents, shouldn't say that if your son passes first, then everything goes to this person, because you're going to disqualify them for government benefits. And then the blessing from you just became a burden, So let's make sure that big picture, we don't disrupt what their planning is. And then the family is like, oh, okay, So in community events, I often will tell families, like if I'm going to like a senior center or I'm talking to a church or something like that, I will say, if you hire an estate planner and they don't send you a questionnaire or ask you some complex questions that you wouldn't think of, you need to pick up all your pearls, pick up all your stuff, and go see somebody else, because you may not be getting a full picture of what your needs really are.
Very good. You're talking a little bit about how you approach clients. How do you go about looking for prospective lawyers to work for your firm? I know you have a new one of our Dickinson law students coming in as an intern this summer, but what do you look for?
So the very first thing that I look for is bedside manner, empathy, compassion, the things that your mom had to teach you, right? So I'll say, I can train anybody to do this practice area, but I can't train you to be a nice person. I can't train you to pause when your client says, oh, my husband just had a stroke yesterday. I can't train you to pause and say, I'm really sorry about that. And I know that this is very difficult. Is now still the best time to talk, or do you want me to call you back in an hour, right? I can't teach somebody that. Their mom had to do that, right? Mom and dad needed to teach you that. Assuming that you have that, everything else can fall in line. So that's the first thing. because we're dealing with really, really personal information. We're asking clients literally where their bones are buried, literally, or where they want their bones to be buried. You know, I will say, how do you want to be remembered at death? Do you want to be cremated or funeralized? Two people want a Viking funeral. So they told me they want to be pushed off boats. It's not going to happen, but thank you for sharing. But you know, because they're sharing their most intimate lives with us, we have to be able to be relatable to them. So that's number one. And then number two is to be detail oriented. This is an area where we don't work on one case for 2 years. We work on 30 cases a day. And every time we pick up a file, we have to remember who the client is. You cannot get on the call with a client and be like, give me a minute while I remember which one you are. Not a good idea, right? So detail-oriented means note takers or people who would be open to having a system in place to quickly kind of identify where you are and track your information. So those are the two biggest things. One of my mentors in the law, so regardless of your age, you should always have a mentor, and I have like 6 of them, depending on what the topic is. But one of my mentors recently retired as an appellate division. I'm sorry, he was Third Circuit Court of Appeals. Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and he retired. And so he and I will go back and forth. Hey, I'm really looking at growing my team. Like, what are your thoughts? Whatever. And his comment to me was, and this was a year ago, he said, Crystal, I was a magistrate judge. I was a district court judge. I was on the Court of Appeals. And I just realized 3 months ago what you do. Right? He goes, if it took me this long to understand what you do, there's no chance you're going to get a law student at graduation that's going to tell you, I want to practice elder law. He's like, let's just get your, it's like, get your expectations in line, right? So certainly, if a unicorn shows up at my door, like the one that started today, right? Who says, I have a stated interest in elder law. This is really what I want to do. Here are all the steps that I've taken to learn more about it. I'm committed to this. Give me a shot. That goes a really long way, right? But that's not everybody. And so if it's not everybody, then it's just the question of, are you detail oriented? Do you have the great bedside manner? And are you willing to have conversations that you never thought you would have to have as a lawyer? When you decided to practice law, are you going to be okay sitting in a room and having your client say, I want to be cremated. I want my ashes separated into 8 shares, and I want my kids to make jewelry with each of them. Are you cool if your life meant that you had to type that?
I had a student one time who was so afraid to call clients that he wrote a song. He was a musician, and he wrote a song about how Professor Pearson made him talk to the clients and not just email them.
Well, that's a big deal. And
It is, and it's going to be more of a big deal all the time.
It is a big deal. And I will say, for any team member that works with me, when I say, hey, you know, I need you to reach out to the client to do the blah, 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 for specific clients, I will say in my internal message to my team, call, and I will do it the obnoxious way, caps, bold, underline, right? I need you to call them, because generationally, we still represent a group of folks that do not want to engage via text. They don't want to engage via email. They want to feel like they can pick up the phone and call or walk into an office. And until that generation is no longer with us, we have to follow suit. And then when the next generation has their group of social norms, we need to adjust to that, right?
Exactly.
Our practice.
Yeah. And I think part of it too is what you were talking about earlier. Because we're talking about sensitive issues, you often have to see people in real life to know exactly how it is affecting them. It's very easy to hide, either behind an email or a document.
Mhm.
And when you realize, how deeply something is felt, then you realize how important it is to them to do it the right way.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah, very good.
And that's why I don't talk to clients about Medicaid by phone.
Right. Oh,
Never have.
interesting.
I will not do it. Medicaid is entirely too complex
Yeah.
for me to do by phone. I can't see whether or not your eye did the thing that tells me that you're not following me anymore, right?
Yeah.
So I can do it in person, I can do it on Zoom, but
Yeah.
the phone, it's not even given to you as an option, because I can't then say, if someone challenges me about why mom or dad made a decision that they did, I can't confidently say that they understood what I was talking about if I can't see their face for that, which is different than like, I want my plant to go to my daughter. I mean, that's pretty straightforward, but to understand the nuances of qualifying for a really complex government program, which there should be people who hear this who say, is it really that complex? Yes, it is a very complex government program. And so, I need to see people and kind of so that I can meet them where they are.
One of the other things I think I know about you, and I'm going to hint in the direction, see what you say. There are certain lawyers who are unhappy in life because they don't have a community of other lawyers that they're happy with. My impression is that's not true for you. What do you think about the community of lawyers that practice elder law and estate planning?
So we will say that this is an old school term, I think, right? A gentleman's bar. And what I mean by that is we are incredibly, incredibly collegial. It is not a competition. If I have a colleague who practices 5 minutes down the road and they say, oh my goodness, I got this weird thing and I got to file this court application for the court to approve a trust distribution. Have you done this before? I will go in the system, I will sensitize it so that I don't violate any professional rules of professional responsibility by sharing client information,
Mhm.
but I'll sensitize it, right? Pull the client information out and send it to them. Here's a sample, here's whatever. This bar, we are very collaborative. We work together in a lot of ways. Sometimes we represent the same family, but from a different perspective. And you get further when you get along,
Yeah.
And I think that that's elder law nationally.
I think that is.
So,
Ironically, I'm in Arizona, even though it looks like I'm in the lobby at the law school right now. But I'm in Arizona, which is actually the start of the NAILA organization. It started in Tucson, Arizona, which is where I am. But I can call 3 or 4 lawyers here in Tucson who I've known now for 25 years, and they pick up the phone just to chat because they know we have interests that overlap and they want to share knowledge.
that's right.
And boy, is that a great way to practice law, both as the person who's a young person coming into the practice of law, and as a person like you who are now in their teenage years. And then as somebody like me who finds, oh my goodness, it's hard to retire because every year gets a little bit more relevant in elder law. The questions I'm asked get more and more personal as I get older too. So I find myself feeling, oh, okay,
You
I know
know,
exactly what you're concerned about.
I think that it's something about the practice of law, right? Because your stock goes up the longer you've been practicing.
Yes, that's true.
So your stock price is the highest when you are expected to be like, all right, goodbye. And it's really a difficult concept for people. But I'm telling you, here, we try our best within our bar association, within our NAILA chapter, to pair groups based on their age, their whatever, right? So my crew of elder law associates that I came into this practice area with, we are all partners and owners right now,
Right.
which is wonky. We're like, what happened?
Yeah,
We
that's
were
great.
we still feel like we're the babies, but we're not, right? But then there are actually almost 2 crops that have come up since then. And so as long as you find your people and find your community, we kind of push each other together because admittedly, we don't want bad facts to make bad law. So we
Well,
would
and
rather work
yes,
together than have somebody go rogue and mess it up for everybody.
very true. I mean, I can't tell you how often I've called up an attorney and say, "Now let's talk about this case," because we're worried about where it might go. And I think part of that too is if you like the practice and you want to see the practice succeed in your area, you're trying to find ways to help it adapt in the right way. And I think, I mean, the fact that you answer every time I call you for help, you most recently were at a program at Dickinson Law, and it was a diversity program where we were introducing elder law as a diversity, inclusive subject. And that's what I appreciate about that area of the practice is that we are lifelong friends as a result of working together on tough problems as the law has developed in tough ways also.
That's right.
Yes, very good. Daryl, can you think of other things perhaps we haven't talked about? This has been a pretty robust conversation, I would say.
I agree. This has been a totally robust conversation, and in fact, inspiring one in more ways than one. Because seeing how well this conversation went, I'm going to now make a plug through this program for folks that are interested in both either appearing on this program or interviewing somebody else who might be appearing on this program. And we can hopefully grow the program and reach more people and showcase more of our talent and bring more useful information to people in that way. But thank you so much, Crystal Edwards. Crystal is from Porzio, Bromberg, and Newman, and Professor Catherine Pearson, my colleague from Penn State Dickinson Law. And this has been Profiles in Leadership. Thank you.